Aloha and welcome to Reflections on Interpretation, talking story with guides and interpreters. I'm Tim Merriman, your host, coming to you from the big island of Hawaii. I don't have my co-host, Bill Gwaltney, here with me today, but we're going to do something unique today. We have a bunch of trainers with us today, and I want to allow them each to introduce themselves. So,
Monique Thompson. I have a business called Raindrop Naturalists. I'm an interpretive trainer, an independent interpretive trainer. I've taught close to 30 interpretive classes, and I enjoy this field, and I'm excited to be part of this discussion with Tim and all of you.
Hi, my name is Matt Villamaino. I'm an interpretive trainer out of Central Massachusetts.
I'm Clark Hancock, an interpretive trainer and consultant out of Austin, Texas.
Oh, hello. I'm Angel Burns. I am an interpretive trainer in Delaware and just recently took Tim's Heart training, which was really amazing. So thank you for the invitation today.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Prince, and I'm an interpretive trainer based in Tallahassee, Florida.
I'm Joanna, and I'm an senior interpreter at the Historic New Orleans Collection, and I also recently went through Tim's Heart training.
my son, Toby Merriman,
Well, I grew up digging ponds for my father in all weather and all environments. My best friends when I was a child were Swainson's hawks and American kestrels and a couple of boa constrictors. And I think my first job was working for the old man. I led 60-person tour groups of a dinosaur exhibit full of animatronic dinosaurs when I was 8. So I've been indoctrinated to be an interpretive trainer, but I rebelled for about 20 straight years by being an IT diagnostician and having good health care and steady pay, which Dad considers me going a little bit rogue. But in the last, I would say 5 years, I've been called back to a sort of education advocacy. You know, I grew up in the household of a natural resource advocate, and now I find myself sort of fighting for the school, fighting with the school, fighting for the faculty and against the faculty, and fighting for the students. And in a time of massive cultural shift, and we'll talk more about that, but the teachers at the school, believe me, have noticed the reading thing we were discussing earlier. We'll get into it more in detail. Like before COVID, we noticed a shift in student behavior, and then COVID greatly shifted student behavior. And then now we also have the AI technology boom going on affecting our classroom. So it's been a couple of tornadoes and a hurricane for the classroom.
well, just for a second, tell me what your formal educational background is and is.
Well, I have a bachelor's in IT and recently finished an MFA in creative fiction related to storytelling platforms online with a focus on developing disability support, blind support for online games and things like that. And then working for a school for 20 plus years, and then working for this facility for the last 4. And this facility is meant to be a resource for faculty and students to modernize their classroom, to defend themselves against AI abuse or incorporate it into their curriculum. And then also the same deal with VR technology, video game technology, and things like that.
Well, if you would give me the one quick English department story that talks about resistance people have. You said you now have an English program that is state of the art in terms of integrating AI. How did that happen?
I got together with our writing center director. The writing center is an equalizer. Because kids come to college with a wide variety of study skills and reading comp levels I came from a rural high school, and I felt like a smart kid there. And when I got to college, the workload was such a step up, I felt pretty dumb for a while. And the Writing Center is an equalizer. So I got the director of the Writing Center, Enrique Paz, who works with students coming into college all the time to get their reading comprehension levels, get their confidence in writing levels up to where they're cool with going to get their chemistry or music or whatever degree they want. So I got him on board. I got the director of writing studies itself, Joshua Daniel, who organizes all of our English 101 sections. There's 50 of them. 50 sections of 30 kids in English 101 at SIU every fall. And we got together and said, we're going to answer the ChatGPT problem better and more completely than every other school we can think of. And we have something that no other school has, less resistance. There's nobody telling us we can't modify the Comp 101 syllabus. From us, from the classroom to the governor, we were able to convince everybody to let us do it. So as of fall in 2024, SIU Comp 101s, you could take a section where it, week one, talked to you about AI ethics, how to use AI without cheating, without being accused of cheating, how to cite it properly, how to use it ethically, and then also how to use it well in the classes where it's allowed. And then Enrique himself, the director of the Writing Center, taught 2 sections where you were allowed to use ChatGPT every day in English 101, but you had to cite it like a source. He redesigned the entire syllabus. It's pretty different, but he focused it on the deliverables, which are, we have to prove that their reading comprehension level came up, that they're thinking critically, that they're able to write a certain amount of pages per day. And they are. The classes were a total success, and so we're melding that into other things now. So what I've been saying, which is a big brag, but you got to brag when you can, our core curriculum is as modern as any core curriculum in the world.
Cool. I wanted that introduction to make this point. The pushback I have gotten, which has been a little in trainers for interpretation, has been that, oh, well, we're trying to get people to use critical thinking skills. And if they can't write a theme and develop their talking points without use of the computer or just using it as a typewriter, then they're not going to be good at it. And I said, I disagree completely. I think if you know what a strong theme is, and you can get to it in 2 minutes instead of an hour and 20 minutes, that's a good thing. You'll spend the rest of that time getting better at what you're going to do in your presentation. And again, there's some pushback. So I wanted to make the point that your program, writing based, has had that pushback and has dealt with it. I want to open it up to questions. Yes, Matt.
I think that this one would probably apply to everybody. So one of the things, like I've been using ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot to help write themes and objectives and different products, and it doesn't necessarily know the definition of or the qualities of a theme or the qualities of an objective. It gives, especially objectives, it really is not a fan of that. I'm not going to say, is there a way? Because I know there has to be. How do I program it essentially so that it remembers? Like I could say, all right, when writing an interpretive theme, always follow this list or upload some documents or give it all of the criteria that I want it to pull from so that it does that.
AI are trained. They're apps that learn, and they're initially trained on just a mountain of words. I tell our kids when we do the presentation that the LLM is an app that learns. It has no other real function than learning. So you feed it a couple million words, it kind of starts talking. You feed a few billion words and you get a GPT. And then GPT and Claude, and I think Gemini, I haven't worked with it as much, but it's on top right now. They all have mechanisms where you train it a little more because GPT is a generalist. It's been fed on all the classic literature, history documents. Unfortunately, it has read Reddit and things like that. So its mind is full of confusing human generalist knowledge. So with a custom GPT, which they usually charge you for, but I think they're offering, if you have an EDU email address, a couple free months so you could try it out. They have a custom GPT. And you talk to a GPT to create the custom GPT. You go, I'm giving you this document. I'm writing you this passage about what I'm trying to do. You kind of have to educate it because, as you said, it's clever and it's helpful, but it doesn't know what you do. It needs you. So you teach it and then you call it Interp GPT or something like that. And you talk to it, feed it these documents, and then it becomes very wise. For a project we had here, I wanted a GPT that could take something off my plate for a class we had. And this is a silly analogy, but for this class, I had to repeatedly write famous magical artifacts like objective correlative, like Excalibur, Merlin the Magician's hat. And I would write 3 or 4 pages of history and lore and details about that item. And I was like, this is taking me forever. I fed 30 items. I fed maybe 60 or 70 pages of my own writing into a custom GPT. And now I can tell GPT, make me a magic wrench with 50 years of history that makes sense for this setting. And it will do it. And it's reliable. And I've even released it to the public, and the other people who do this in the creative fiction department love it. It's called Spacebone. But you fill it with your knowledge and it will learn. And where it is not learning, you'll have a conversation with it. You'll say, hey, GPT, you're getting this wrong. You need to focus on this. This, you can prioritize. You can say it's very important this, and then it's less important this. And it's a conversation. And then the other one I would add to that is Notebook LM. If you have a massive amount of information to consume, Notebook LM is free from Google. It does not hallucinate. We've all heard how AI hallucinates, makes things up, gets things wrong. That's true, but Notebook does not. You can feed Notebook 50 PDFs that are the laws for the park system of your state, and it will learn them. And then you can have a conversation with Notebook about those laws. Go, what about this? Can I do this? Can I move this here? What do I have to put on this sign? What do I have to say about this? It will get you the answer and show you exactly what document and what page and what line it learned that from, so you can verify that it's not lying to you. But it never will so far.
So as a follow-up then for creating for this interpretive GPT, they're just specific on theme writing or everything else. Would Notebook be the best tool to start with that? Would Copilot, how do I start? Like I've done some Google searches on this, and I'm kind of a little overwhelmed about.
So over on the left, these are custom GPTs I've made for various purposes. This is the one that writes particular items. These other ones help with some of the games we do. This one keeps me out of trouble with my procurement card. I fed it all of the rules for SIU's procurement cards, and I can literally ask it, can I buy a 12-pack of beer with my P card? And no, you cannot. That's an easy one, but it can answer harder ones too. And it'll actually tell me, it's going to give me the long answer. Thank you, GPT. I get it. No beer. So you make these little experts, and I use these things 20 times a day now because they're infinitely more useful than the regular version of GPT. Much more so.
Just real quickly here to clarify then. So this is just regular chat GBT, and one function of that is to set up these specialized inquiries.
They do want some money for it. They want $20 a month, but like I said, they're offering a free if you have an EDU email for a couple months.
Well, Toby, as I recall, they had an annual price that was much lower.
Yeah, the yearly you get about a 40% discount.
Yeah, it's like $80 or something.
Maybe, yeah, it sounds like even more so.
Yeah.
And it is a noticeable difference between the pay version and the free version of GPT. But you could also do this with Gemini. I think, although I haven't done it, Claude has some custom conversation agents you can make. But GPT is definitely a good entry point to this idea.
I would love to go back to the students in the Writing Center. Can you tell me a little bit more? And I think about this with interpretation. So if Matt were to create a document, and as you created the magic wrench, but you fed your own material into it and worked with GPT, how do you cite something like that? When does that material become ChatGPT's, and when does it remain your own? And if you were to put it through Gemini, Copilot, or even DeepSeek or Claude AI using multiple GPTs, where does that person start or end in that conversation or that document?
For citing and official stuff, we just use MLA like it's a website of any other type. Although my custom GPTs would say the name of it. It would actually say Spacebone, a custom GPT by Toby Merriman, and have the link to it. But the other ones, I think you would cite the same way. My master's thesis has 3 pages of references, and a lot of them are AI links. just MLA. And in fact, the AI prepared my references for me. It's the only part of my thesis it wrote.
Can I ask a follow-up? What critical skills did you see these students developed? And was that mostly in relationship to learning how to write the prompts, or did you see other skills developing along the way?
Comp 101 was the biggest speed bump we could give ourselves, but also the most important one because everyone who comes through here has to pass it one way or the other. They don't let you on to chemistry or physics or art without taking English 101. And so it has, regulated by the state of Illinois, something like 20 different assessments it has to check off. And I'm going to have a presentation here in a few weeks that I hope to live stream where Enrique is going to talk in detail about his syllabus and what he did and how he changed the assessments. And the bad news for some of our professors is he fundamentally changed every part of the syllabus. It's very different from a conventional Comp 101 because these days, if you just say, write me an essay, you'll get 25 very boring C- caliber essays written by whatever AI. And I think what you're asking though is what is the root of it? And I'll give you an example of at the beginning, we developed these techniques in creative fiction under my thesis chair, Pinckney Benedict. And in creative writing, Pinckney would say, week 1 of creative writing 119 intro, he would say, write me a story. You have to use one AI, and it has to be either a very happy event from your own life or a very sad one if you're willing to share. And he did this for a couple reasons. He did one because nobody really wants to turn over my grandma died to GPT and watch GPT kind of half-ass it. So he forced them onto a meaningful topic. And so they really wrote it, but then they had to use GPT to help them. So perfect spelling and grammar, generally good paper structure, but their real thoughts and events and feelings because it was particular to them. So he did that to get them to write it for real, let the AI help, but not replace you. And then the other reason he did it is because it restored trust. In January of 2023, GPT was released for free to the world, and students, some started using it basically to cheat. It's not exactly plagiarism, but it definitely is academic dishonesty by almost any definition. So trust was destroyed between our faculty and our students. And by assigning AI week 1, saying you have to cite it and tell me how you used it, show me exactly what you did. In fact, you could even include the transcript of your whole conversation with GPT alongside your paper. That restores trust because then the kids are confessing everything they did about it. They're being rewarded for going, yeah, it did this for me. I didn't like this. It messed up this story about my grandma, so I said, back off, and then I let it handle this part. So they're not getting in trouble. They now trust the instructor to hear everything they've done along the way, and the instructor trusts them to be honest about how they got there. Show your work. I did. We're cool. Then you move on to other things. So Enrique took that kernel and propagated it out to an entire semester and checked off all these boxes with Comp 101. It's really an impressive work by him. And I have his permission to share the syllabus if anybody wants a copy. But if I can get him to, I'm going to have him talk about this publicly in a few weeks, and I'm going to stream it, put it on the CVEX website. And this is a veteran English educator, a PhD in teaching English and running the writing center. And I really think he's done a great thing for us.
I should mention that Lisa and I had a good friend. I was on his doctoral committee at Colorado State, who's an interp professor, and he was teaching at a Chinese university for Arizona State, but from our Lanai, because he had not gotten his visa to work there yet. And AI was becoming one of those issues. And when he and I talked about it, he says, well, should I be failing people? Or are you obviously using AI? And I said, they're going to use it. So why not work up a rubric that gives them a D for that crappy paper that was, or presentation that was developed entirely by AI, but give them a C, B, or A for making it unique and start thinking about what makes it unique and what makes it personal for them. And I love the story about Pinckney because the idea that you take something from your life experience and write it with AI is that blend. And it also makes you a better critic of what you write because you're going, well, AI changed my story and I don't like it changed. That's not what happened. I'm going to go tell it how to correct it. I want to mention one quick thing. In a conversation on Zoom the other day with the IPAL network, which is a Latin American Caribbean network of interpreters, Sam Hamm mentioned Colby Brockvist. Colby is an adventure guide, and he has written a book on guiding that includes an interpretive section. Well, he's used that custom GPT and developed a thing called Waypoint, he calls it, where he's fed into it all of his approaches to use of interpretation and adventure guiding. And so he's using Waypoint as his way of digesting his next idea. And so I didn't understand the custom thing, Toby, so I appreciate hearing that. I'll go back in and start playing with that.
It's very helpful. I just want to add to the emotional investment side of it. Growing up around interpreters, I learned from Dad and many others that what you guys do is engage the public, not just intellectually. You don't just spit facts at them. You tell them meaningful stories. You get them to have an emotional attachment. You know, this forest is beautiful. This museum exhibit is breathtaking. You get all the parts of the brain active together, is the idea that I learned. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with the way we teach with AI, so that the kids don't just phone it in or have ChatGPT phone it in. Nobody wants that.
I'll go. Toby, you talked about feeding content to these kind of custom GPTs to make them little experts. One of the things you mentioned was, for example, feeding it the park laws. So I guess my question is kind of about the ethics of feeding content to an AI that you did not create. So park laws, sure, that's out there, that's public. But what if, Tim, what if I wanted to feed the heart manual to an AI? Would that be ethical?
First of all, I've told you that once you take the course, you can do anything you want with it. So yes, but I would tell you that any other author of a curriculum might say, you need my clearance to do that. I don't feel that way. I started with the precept that what I was producing was going to be open source, that other people could change it, improve it, modify it to their needs. And so, yeah.
Joanna's right, though. Any cloud-based AI, whatever you give it, you are doing the equivalent of pasting it on the outside of your house. You're making it public. So if you don't own it, or if you don't want it public, or if it's specifically restricted, you cannot. We work with the med school a bunch, and they're subject to HIPAA regulations in most cases. So they have to use what's called a local AI. So instead of giving a mountain of patient records they want to dive into to ChatGPT, they cannot do that. They would be in violation if they did. They run a local AI, which is run on a big, expensive computer, $4,000 or $5,000 minimum, preferably like $300,000 or $500,000. I helped them spec one out last week for $319,000. And it sits in an office. It's on a restricted network. Only certain human beings have access to it. And it runs a little local LLM on it. And you can then feed it you can feed it 100,000 patient records and go, talk to me about trends for diabetes. Talk to me about, age, this, whatever. They can then use it within HIPAA regulations that way. So the technology can work for you in a secure way, but it is more expensive and it takes more effort. But yeah, you're subject to all the usual rules. The author, Stephen King, prime example, said, I don't want any of my books in AI. And so they have to leave them out.
Yeah, Toby, it's very exciting to hear the really groundbreaking work that you're doing there and in formal education. The challenge we have, or that I see, is that we are in many of what we're doing when we are training interpreters is we're training frontline interpreters. They don't necessarily have the same academic background, or we are not stressing academics at all. How do we introduce AI to this very non-academic group so that it is usable to them. And I'm wondering things like just simple things like referring it to as AI, which may be a have all sorts of baggage put into it by the mainstream media. Is that a roadblock to them actually using the tool?
It's a huge roadblock. And it's not an academic thing either. I have brilliant, charming PhD scholars in areas, and I have 20 years of history saving them from themselves when their hard drive crashed or whatever. I came to the rescue. They love me, and they're my neighbors, and our kids went to school together, and they hate AI on such a religious level, they will not set foot in my facility. That's part of the challenge of my job. And I love those people. And every chance I get, I sit them down in a room with people like Enrique who are successful in AI so that everybody can hear the extremes, all the different points of view on it. And your interpretive guides can benefit because I remember as a kid, Tim Merriman Sr. going, what the hell am I going to write for this public service announcement? What am I going to tell the Pueblo City Council about this? And he would burn the midnight oil till 1 or 2 in the morning writing these things. As a naturalist, as a biologist, as a botanist, he's somehow now supposed to understand politics and fundraising and city ordinances. And GPTs and AIs like that can help your regular folk if they'll learn what they can ask it, what it can be trusted with, and also importantly, what it cannot be trusted with. You can't ask it about Abraham Lincoln's birthday. It could make it up. But my little P-card AI is a perfect example of a mundane thing that I have to do at work that I struggle with because I'm not an accountant by trade, but it helps keep me out of jail. And it'll help you format emails better, and it'll help you put up PSAs for the public or don't feed the bears. It'll help you make all that stuff. It'll kind of speed up that part of your work.
As a follow-up to it, one of the things we do in interpretive training is we actually are helping our participants understand the importance of clarity of thinking going into an interpretive opportunity and interpretive exchange. How would you use introducing AI to help with that?
With the specific, can you give me an example of the?
Well, for instance, the development of themes.
Yeah.
Which is, that's the thread that goes through everything. And as what is it? Bill Lewis once said, what the development of theme is 90% of developing an interpretive product. And people think, oh, you write the one sentence and then that's it. But actually, it's constantly going back and redoing it. And I'm wondering about the development of prompts for inquiries, specifically on like theme development or just subject development. What is the workflow that you perceive on how that might work?
I would start by asking the AI for something it's very good at, which is writing outlines. Like if you were going to write a book on a particular event, or if you're going to make a whole training course. Our professors, I think even the big AI haters are using it to write quizzes. But you have an idea in mind. The idea could be conservation. It could be fundraising. It could be a particular historical thing you want to highlight. Level with GPT right off the bat. Say, I am aiming for this, and I would like you to help me outline sort of chapters or major points, but I want to end on this. This is the big finish. Help me write it backwards. And it'll give you a good outline. My thesis, for example, I had a through line, which was that I wanted to provide blind people the ability to participate in largely visual designed narrative platforms, like online video games that are point and click. And it wrote everything. It wrote like an outline for me with some placeholder text, and I replaced every single word of that placeholder text. But it did help keep me organized because I'm sort of a disorganized person. So it's useful for that. And I've seen a history author we have who's written 20 books on the most obscure people in history. When he sat down on it, he named a historical figure, wrote a half a paragraph about this person, and says, I'm writing a book about them. What are the 8 chapter titles you suggest? And according to his actual plan, it was one off. Like it went 1 through 8. You're going to do this, family history or origins, blah, 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 blah. He says it's almost perfect for an outline. And of course, he wouldn't let her write the book because it would get some of the details wrong.
Matt, you had a side question. I wanted to catch that we'll go to Monique.
Yeah, so it was a follow-up to what Joanna was saying. We were talking about everything that you put into a chat GPT is public. So that also include, if I'm creating a custom GPT, that
Yes.
anything feed into it is now available to everything else that's out there in that particular GPT?
Potentially.
Yeah, so you have basically assume that it is.
I would.
Okay.
This man raised me to never write anything down that I wouldn't say to the entire world. You can tell that philosophy comes from repeated mistakes of his.
I have always said I learn nothing from my successes. When I'm successful, I think I'm a genius. When I screw up, I go, I'm not doing that again. So that's been the learning process of my life.
Genius looks a lot like preparation.
Yeah.
Yeah, years ago, a guy pointed out to me that once you write a document, it has a life of its own.
True.
That's right. And when you write an email, it has a life of its own.
Oh, just speaking of learning experiences, I think just as far as critical thinking skills, and that's what I was wondering with your students.
Mhm.
Thinking back to the first prompt that I wrote to how I write prompts today, as far as the specificity and what my goals are and feeding that information, I'm wondering if their critical thinking skills developed along the way when they were writing prompts or using ChatGPT to look at specificity for papers and how we can benefit as interpreters from that, just thinking of learning that skill. As Clark was saying, for our students, understanding what the goal is, learning to think about, specific profiles for what you're looking for.
The parallels to what you guys do and what we do is you're seeking to educate the public about something or make them give a crap. And we come at that at a very difficult time. Periodically, human beings invent technology that disrupts society, the classroom, the computer, internet, all these things. And we always adjust. But as a philosophy professor came to my office one time and sat down, put his head in his hands, and he said, my moral philosophy class is a disaster. And he said, they were not reading, I don't think, as much as I required and as well as I required before COVID. And then COVID sent them home, slowed things down, made things easier but worse. And they came back with a new notion that education is optional. Going to school is optional. Showing up to class is completely optional. You go if you want to. This generation of students has been conditioned to feel very differently. And then you bake AI into it at the end, and you have a temptation to just put their own education on cruise control. I think you guys are up against that problem too. I think we're all talking about the same human beings, our kids, our people. So we're going at it. The reason Enrique completely rewrote the syllabus was to try to address all of those problems. And we start by kind of leveling with them in sort of a desperate, please stop hurting us kind of way. We say, one, it's difficult to detect this technology. So if you use it, if you weaponize it against your teacher, you're going to hurt them. And they won't be able to guarantee that you've used it and punish you. So they'll just kind of have to hope. But the other thing, and I'm not sure if this relates as well, but for us, it's very important that we tell the students we care what you think. When we assign an essay, we want your opinion. And your opinion can be, Dr. Merriman, you've assigned The Great Gatsby and I thought it was terrible. Let me tell you 5 reasons why this is the worst book you've ever made me read. And the person grading that paper is like, thank God, an actual opinion. GPT doesn't hate anything. And so we start by showing them that the technology is not yet at a place where it can express any kind of serious opinion. and it will produce a D minus kind of paper every time, or a C maybe. And they need to incorporate some of themselves in it. And I think the same will apply for your folks. They can't just replace themselves with it. They need to augment. Sorry, I went way around the horn for that one.
Toby, what you've been talking about mostly here is writing,
Yes.
written language.
Yeah.
And from your discussion, has the academic community noticed a decrease in the use of long form written products? And this applies to interpretation because most of the time we don't do long form.
Yeah.
We have maybe 3 minutes to talk to someone in times. So how do we use the AI to create these nuggets that we kind of throw out there? Instead of the long form is great if you're going to take a deep dive and you got the time and you have someone's attention.
Yep.
But our job is to get them, open that door and for them to consider taking that deep dive. How different is using AI for verbal communications versus written communications?
I think it's still, this is where the technology is. This is still absolutely reliant on the interpreter. Where it can help is you could feed it 2 history books about Kentucky Lake and say, give me the bullet points of every story or anecdote or historical event. I need to talk about Kentucky Lake for 3 minutes, and I don't know what to pick out of these 200 years of events. And summarize. I like that one. Go find that one. Bring me more. I would use it like that, but ultimately, I would still want to curate every part of that 3 minutes myself to make sure it was maximally impactful. I don't think the AI would be a silver bullet for that. I don't think you could say, go ahead, Dad.
Yeah, one of the things that happens to me is I'll pretty much know what I want to say or what I want to do. And I type pretty fast. I used to type 100 words a minute. I'm probably still 70. And so I sit down and write a narrative as fast as I can go, not worrying about errors, not worrying about anything, throwing in the content that I want. And I go reorganize and summarize this 1,500 words into 500 words that make the more logical transitions. And it usually gives me back really good stuff. And then I go edit it, and that becomes what I actually use.
That's a great point, Dad. We have a Spanish teacher who uses it for leveling. She wants to use Don Quixote in her Spanish class, but she wants to use it for first years and second years. So what she does is feed a passage of it into GPT and say, lower the difficulty level of this text for a second year Spanish learner, Spanish 201. And then she reads through what it does, and it does some dumb stuff. But in general, it'll take 10 pages and whip it into shape in seconds. And then she makes some minor corrections. And she's got a level 200 Spanish piece of Don Quixote. And of course, she encourages them to read the real thing when they're ready. But that's a prime use of it, is text processing. And it gets the gist. You explain what your goal is, what your theme is, and it'll meet you there if you give it enough information.
Well, and that gets into that whole other thing. I have written puppet plays that have been published by Scott Forsman readers, and I used to agonize for hours trying to get it into 4th grade readability, which has a whole list of words you have to look up and make sure that it uses. And now you can, and of course you can do that with Word. It actually will do readability stuff, but ChatGPT just makes that really simple.
And if you don't type fast, the speech to text functionality of GPT is fantastic.
And I've never learned to use that.
You just punch the microphone on pull it up on your phone or on your computer and punch the microphone and say, take notes and help me organize this into something. And then blah, just say everything you can think of about that topic and then go, all right, organize that into an outline. You'll get it.
Yeah. And for a lot of us who are incredibly glib, but not incredibly clear, that could be a good thing.
You can also ask it, is this clear? Is this clear to a general public audience, or am I getting too far into the weeds with scientific names of animals and things like that? It's always a question of how much knowledge are they ready for. You get a general public group, it's one thing, and you go, oh, adjust this. I'm going to have a bunch of biologists and botanists, so I can just unleash everything on them. You can have it help you adjust your.
I want to take another tack for a moment. You did some things for your buddy Josh that involved macros or apps. How did that work? And tell a little bit about Josh's story.
Well, Josh is a musician, works in Nashville, Tennessee as an audio tech and as a hired gun for solos. So you probably heard him, but you didn't know you heard him because he's just the guitar part in some random country song. And he got paid like $800 to go in and knock out 3 or 4 versions of it. Whatever gets on the album, he gets paid for. And he's done that for years. He also works as a producer. So when you're making an album, he's in there listening to it and saying more of this, less of that, and adjusting levels. He's done that for years. And I once saw him at a dive bar filled with people, standing on one leg, adjusting his guitar pedals with his bare toes. He took his foot out of his shoe and holding his guitar up like this and turning his head like this to hear better and balance. And he's completely blind. And I was like, this guy, and he took a solo like that, an electric guitar solo. I said, this guy's way too cool. I'm going to take him down a peg or two. And I taught him to play Dungeons and Dragons. So I've made him into a giant nerd. And he loves his D&D characters. And I know that he's at Nashville parties full of really cool people talking about, well, my paladin's level 10 and he has a +1 longsword. He's excruciating now. So I did that. And when COVID came along, this, just like it affected the classroom, it sent everybody home. And suddenly you're on blurry webcams with terrible microphones and bad echoes and everything sucks. And it did that to D&D too, because D&D you normally met at a table and played together. And I went, okay, I found a web app that lets us play. It handles the dice, the paper, it handles everything. It shows you the map. And I went, it doesn't work at all for Josh. When he takes his screen reader to it, his screen reader goes table 1, table 2, table 3, table 4, table 5, table 6, table 7, ad infinitum. And so when the AI, when GPT came along and it had some coding ability, I realized that it was going to be, I don't know, $10,000 or $15,000 to hire a company to write the code to enable these sites to work for my one friend that I needed this for. It was impossible. GPT helped me because I have a little coding experience from 20 years ago. I'd taken intro to programming as part of my IT training, but I was terrible at it because I'm disorganized. GPT kept me organized. GPT understood the purpose. I said everything you do has to be text to speech. It has to verbalize it to Josh. He can't ever use a mouse. You can't ever pop up windows in his face. You can never do these things that trip up blind support. And so together, GPT and I wrote something like 250 macros that sort of form this app and allow Josh to fully participate in this purely visual platform for storytelling and game playing. And so I continue to ruin his life and make him uncool.
It writes macros. I never learned to use macros, even though I knew they existed. But now I'm curious to try to learn how to do it. I'm going to get Toby to help me. But the idea that it will write code, I mean, I will take you back to NAI's history. Way back in 1996, and we learned that there was such a thing as websites, and you had to know something called HTML. We got a 16-year-old high school senior girl come in to work for us on a one of those work learning programs at the high school. And she wrote HTML without looking at a book or doing anything. Once she learned it, would just sit there and type HTML. And we'd go, well, we want the page to have some green and white and yellow on it. Okay. And we want these fonts to be okay. And she knocked out NAI's first website just sitting there doing that. Well, can you design a website, Toby, with
I can by hand very slowly, and it'll be hideous.
Can you
Or
demonstrate it?
I could in Squarespace. Yeah, sure. Let's see. Or, I mean, Squarespace takes you a step closer to it, but I know you want me to show cursor. So let me do that. Let me share. So this is cursor, and you don't need to be able to read anything on here. But all you need to know is that I took, in case you wanted to do this today, the Heartfelt website, and I stole part of it. I stole the pictures. I got your pictures, and I got your basic text of it. And so I can come in here and tell this AI, I want you to, I'm going to say, familiarize with code base. And it's going to read every document in your website and all the images. And it's going to figure out that this appears to be a website project for Heartfelt Associates. Let me look at it. And it's understanding the site structure right now. And still reading, still thinking. And then I'm going to say, make me a new version with a more modern look. Let's say glass morphism. Don't be insulted, Dad. Your website's 10 years old. And keep all the information and themes. What you're watching right now is the code flying by as it writes hundreds or thousands of lines of code creating this website out of nothing. Based on my prompt, based on the old one, based on the available images, and it's going to, you can even see the information kind of flying by here. And within a short amount of time, let's see, it's already made it. So, Heartfelt Associates Modern, here you go. See that? Just made that.
But the aesthetic needs some tweaking. Okay.
Oh, I think this is a first draft. For one, I'm of the generation that prefers dark mode. Redo it in dark mode. It's now going to modify the entire color scheme of the entire site, every single page and subpage and every bit of it to match a new aesthetic according to my specification. And you can see how fast this is. This is faster than hiring your own web designer. It's almost as fast as just taking a template off Squarespace and adapting it. And so it's done, and we can just refresh. It's now dark mode. It changed text color. It changed the box shapes. You notice these move when I hover over them and highlight in red. It's hard to see probably on your screens. Let me blow it up.
Pop it up on share so we can see this a little better.
Share this. Go. So you can see there's movement. It put in some subtle animation. It's working on it. So you sit here and work with this. You talk to it like a human. You're essentially the project director, and the AI is your coder. It's the person you've hired to help you. So we talked a little bit about writing AI. I could also show you guys image AI. Coding AI is going to have the biggest impact on the people in the biz. And by impact, I mean a ruthless sort of situation where if they start coding with AI, they're going to be okay. And if they don't code with AI, they're going to get run over by it. They're going to be replaced by it. If I were a coder, I would definitely be jumping on this technology in a huge way so that I don't get left behind, because it absolutely can do that. But that's an example of how I wrote all the stuff for Josh, was with a coding AI that assisted me, and I gave it the basic directions.
Now I got to get this over to folks working with a nonprofit I'm working with to do this. So it's like, okay, how am I going to introduce this to them? Okay, right.
Yeah. It's a touchy topic. I once presented on image AI to a pack of artists. Midjourney AI. This is the other thing, is in your business, sometimes you need a logo or anything. Somebody give me a logo for something. Logo for a business or an event or a please don't litter sign, whatever you'd like.
No smoking, no vaping, but tailor it. Oh, well, tailor it to
National Park sign, or
yeah. Let's go with that.
have an image of an exploding vape. Let's see what we get. just like GPT was fed on billions of words, this one was fed on billions of images, photographs, Taylor Swift's Instagram. I'm sure it learned a lot there. And in seconds, it creates 4 no smoking, no vaping signs. And there's some flaws. There's some typos. There's some weird formatting. But this one looks kind of ominous. And I'd like it to draw 8 variations in under a minute. Now it's going to do that. And this is something you would pay an artist $300 or $500 for and wait several weeks and then fuss with them about details about it. This is orders of magnitude faster and cheaper. So this will have a potentially devastating impact on certain markets of artists. Or if you are an artist who does this already, this will speed you up times 100 and you can take on a vastly greater workload. For my job, I'm sort of an amateur graphic designer. Go ahead, Dad.
Tell briefly what you were telling me yesterday about this has been going on for years with blue collar workers, and now intellectual workers are all upset about how it's changed.
When we talk to the kids about this, I like to pull up usually this image. Nope, not that one. Something like this. There we go. And I say, when I was a kid, every one of those yellow robots was a person who made more money than I'll ever make per year working at SIU, had health insurance, they bought a house, they put their kids through college cash. This is the 80s. It was a mythical time. And somewhere along the line, we invented a robot that could pick things up and move them and manipulate things. And we thought, how cool. And we immediately put tens of thousands of workers out of work, forced them to retrain a new job or go find a new job or go on unemployment just because of the innovation. And the robot wasn't necessarily made to ruin anybody's life, but it had that collateral effect. And this image AI is having that effect in the graphic design world. GPT is having that effect on office workers. Because if your park office or nature center has 2 office workers and you teach them how to use GPT and they get wicked good with it, they're now 20 to 30% more productive. You don't need to hire a third. That hypothetical third person never gets hired by you, and they got to go find a job somewhere else. So even at the best of times, it's going to have an effect.
I think a point that should be made here is, again, this is a tool that is available in the marketplace. Yeah. And whether we invest, if we're working with organizations, whether we invest in our own human resource capabilities for dealing with this, or we contract with outside folks. The big thing is that under all this, in our role as interpreters, one of our major roles is the building of community. Yep. Working with people for the preservation, conservation of whatever subject we're dealing with, whatever place we're dealing with. So I think we have to be very careful here in realizing that efficiency may be counterproductive to our larger goal of community development. And finding that balance is very important.
Our philosophy is similar. The corporate world will absolutely can you and replace you with a robot tomorrow if they can. That's the reality. So we don't want to do that to our people in the school, and you definitely don't want to do that to your park service, even though it's kind of happening for other reasons right now. So that is a huge concern, is where and when do we do this? And hopefully you still invest in the people you have and continue to.
I think we have to ask the question of ourselves. Toby makes the case that for decade after decade, we've lost blue collar jobs to automation, to innovation in the mechanical world. Now suddenly it's come to the intellectual world, and we have people bemoaning that maybe I won't have a job because I've been doing this unique thing with my mind that this computer now does easier, faster, and maybe even better. Oh, woe is me. Don't use that computer. Throw that away. Get rid of that technology. Well, tough luck. I mean, the guy at Ford Motor Company didn't get to blockade the use of robots. They came in and took his job. We have to help people adapt. And that's one of the reasons I'm not willing to say to interpretive trainers, hey, don't teach this technology. We need people to be critical thinkers with their own mind, not using AI, VR, all these other things. We need to help them make the transition. That's the reason I want to teach it in the Heart course. By the way, I didn't tell you, and those of you that were in the recent Heart course, we were at the Diane Fossey Gorilla Center in Rwanda recently. Some of you know that. They had a VR machine, and you sat in a seat and put on a VR headset, and you went up with the gorillas, and you went with the director of the Gorilla Center standing there telling you what you were observing with the silverback gorillas. And you flew in like you were on a drone and then landed with the gorillas. And the chair would move when the gorilla would go by and bump you a little bit. And oh, by the way, we had a silverback nudge one of our participants we took along on an eco tour and just roll her down the hill. And we caught it all on video. So that's going to show up on our Facebook pages.
Comforting for her.
But I loved it. And I've been up with the gorillas 3 times. I know what it's like. And was the VR experience like that? No, it was not. But guess what? It was tantalizing.
For Josh with online D&D and online teaching, which we were forced to do. Before COVID, none of my teachers wanted to teach online. And during COVID, there was no choice. Is the goal of the technology should not be to replace the old classroom, because it still works and we still love being there, hopefully. But the technology can make distance learning less worse. It can make a gorilla VR experience pretty good. Yeah. And then hopefully you get the real thing, because the real thing is really without equal.
By the way,
I think my question is, it's kind of general, about I guess AI backlash, AI like reluctance to even entertain the idea of using AI. And I think something you said, Toby, is like there's an almost, and I see this within my own organization, almost like a religious type opposition. Like for example, this morning I went to look up some, just like a summary of arguments for and against a specific topic. And someone was like, oh, no, don't do that. Don't use AI. Like, it won't give you anything good. I'm like, I found it to be pretty useful sometimes.
Yep.
And she was like, oh, well, enjoy stealing. I've also heard, I suggested someone use it. They're struggling with title ideas. I'm like, have you run it through an AI? It's like, I refuse. I want to still have a job. My point of view is that, AI, it's a tool. You can use it for good purposes. You can run into a lot of ethical issues too. But is there anything that you've ever had success with talking to people who just kind of shut down? Or
yes, I have a golf bag of arguments to shake the stubborn loose a little bit. For my educators, I say, if you ban it from the classroom, what happens on graduation day when you kick them out of said classroom and now they're in a job interview and the job interview goes, so you know how to do this job. Do you know how to use any AIs? Because we use this or this or this. They could literally lose out on a job for ignoring a major technological wave. And for others, I use a mixture of guilt is the gift that keeps on giving. If you don't teach them, who will? If you don't teach them, they'll teach each other how to use it. Is that what you want, anthropologist, mathematician, English teacher? They came to you for knowledge and you're saying, yeah, never mind that. So there's plenty of things. To the ecological, the impact arguments, that's real. Data centers take water. Data centers take power. They like to build data centers where they can get a lot of solar power, which we think is good. Good that they're using solar power for it. But that means, as we know, because there's probably some geologists in this chat, that means they're in a dry area. So they're pulling water from an already dry area. It's going to create logistical problems. And so I get people coming to me that they may have the math wrong or it might exaggerate a little bit. They'll say every time you ask GPT a question, it flings a bottle of water into the sun. I'd say, no, but you're right. There is an impact to literally everything we do. That's what my parents told me when I was 3 years old is climate change. Humans have an impact. If you ever litter, I love you forever unless you litter, and then I don't know you. That's my family. So I want to always tell people when they have those ethical and ecological concerns for AI, you're right. But if your voice is not in the room, if the interpreter, the geologist, the climate scientist is not in the room, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So you need the skeptics and the haters in the room as much or more than you need the early adopters like me and Dad. We jump in with both feet, try weird stuff. But we need that skepticism. That's healthy, I think.
When I'm looking at using AI, and I do want to use it a bit more, it's what can I do more quickly? So there's two levels of how much time do I want to spend on this? If I can't do this project in X amount of time, it's not going to get done. But if I use AI, I can actually do it as opposed to not do it. So depending on what that is, then that project will have an impact. But even if I'm just using AI for my existing stuff, all of the stuff that's on my things, that's obviously saving me time in my workflow as an interpreter with frontline responsibilities as well. If I can do my back end stuff in half the time, I'm now with the visitor, and hopefully like that personal connection that we're talking about, building those emotional and intellectual connections, doing the programs, that's giving me more opportunities to be with them. And that's the reward that can't be really, at this point, we can't be substituted with AI or anything else. And I hope that won't, because that's a personal connection. But basically, you're giving yourself that many more opportunities to make a difference. And what's the offset for that? So yeah, I'm flinging a bottle of water at the sun by using AI, but then I'm conserving it on the other end by making an impact and reaching people that might have never talked to me because I was in the office working on a press release.
That's what goes missing if all of the interpreters in the world swear off ever learning about or using the technology. If you're not involved, then imagine if you guys hadn't been involved in educating the public about climate change in the last 40 years, how much worse off we could be. I know we're nowhere close to where we need to be, but
I don't think we have any credibility with young people that are using these things if we're not only using it, but using it artfully and using it smartly. And the other thing you've mentioned to me, Toby, is when people say, well, they're building all these data centers that suck water out of the desert and that do these terrible things. Yes, that is correct. Are you streaming TV at home? We are doing so many things in our daily lives. Are you still driving your car hundreds of miles? Are you still getting on a jet plane? They use unbelievable amounts of fuel. We are energy demanders. By the way, if you look it up, I think they're saying right now that all of the data centers demand about 2% of the electrical demand on the grid, and that it's going to grow to about 3%. Well, what's that other 97%? That's everything else we're doing in life.
yeah.
I think sometimes we get very hyper-focused on an issue without looking at the big picture.
My favorite, the hardest, I don't know how we apply this to interp, but the hardest resistors at the school who hate it, never want it in their classroom, I say, okay, if I go to SalukiNet, which is where kids sign up for classes, they just see a list of classes and they click register on a class. I'm going to put a red dot on every class that bans AI and a green dot on every class that allows it in. Do you think you're going to have any signups next semester? And the hardest resistor goes,
Okay.
Well, that reminds me of this whole discussion, the normative world, the world we'd love to see, and realize that in interpretation, that's not what we deal with. We deal with the world that we are in. And we are introducing people to seeing things in new or different ways from their experiences. That while we may be advocates in many ways, and we do, but we have to do that in a respectful manner And again, recognize that we are in the situation we are now, and we're helping people understand that situation and how to get there, how we improve our communication skills is something that we constantly have to do. With the advance of machine learning and especially these language models, it's one thing to be in school and be in that class on creative writing and get critique and grow as a creative writer. But after that class, where do you get that input? Where do you get that information? Grammarly is something I've been using a lot lately.
Yeah.
Okay, it helps, and it's a form of machine learning.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with AI. It's like, okay, I do not have to be a Shakespeare. I do not have to be a master in the language, but I do need to know the tools are to help me find the right words and the right phrases to put together to make them meaningful for others. And that's one of the things that really fascinates me about artificial intelligence, this idea of being able to access this massive storage of human created information that before we have not been able to do.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that we think we have not stolen other people's work before. Every book we've read, every movie we've watched, every documentary, I can't attribute everything I've ever learned from someone else. Jacques Cousteau and all of the pundits on various topics, Jane Goodall, the things I've listened to, I'm quite sure I've quoted some of them and not said Jane Goodall once said that. We have learned from other people for as long as we've been learners, and now we have a new system that's out there. I want to suggest this. As interpretive trainers, how many of you primarily train face-to-face? More of you train more face-to-face. Several of us are primarily doing it via Zoom. Monique, I know, occasionally trains face-to-face, but mostly through Zoom. And I'm entirely through Zoom. Well, I was training face-to-face in Rwanda last month, but
We did yesterday.
oh, and yesterday down at a beach here. I'm sorry. I guess I'm still doing a little bit of that, but I think most of what I do is on Zoom. This Zoom technology has opened up a whole new world. I've had students of interpretation from Russia, Philippines, Italy, all over the world. I could not have done that with a live classroom, and I value it. Is it as good as face-to-face? Never.
Less worse.
It's less worse. Yeah, I like that. I just want to thank all of you for taking time to be here with us today and have this conversation. I think it's an important conversation for interpretive trainers. I hope some of our other trainers tune in. I hope I'll see some of you who are listeners to our podcast in one of our heart courses coming up, where we do train with AI as a part of the curriculum. And I wish you well with your interpretive work wherever you are.